Well, it's been quite a day, and I'm sure your heads are spinning with all the different types of equipment that you've been shown and all the different areas that we talked about. And that's good. Since we're kind of a mixed group, most of you are from the independent living system, but many of you are from organizations outside that system. Let me just say, for everyone's benefit, that the assistive technology coordinator, which each center has, is available to any organization to do assessments and to help out with your AT situations. Most of you in this room here are, for lack of a better term, and I'm really trying to find a better term, are case managers. In other words, you do a lot of the paperwork, the intake work, the planning, and so forth for your consumers. And then the AT coordinators, if there's an AT need, you may refer to them to do assessments for what assistive technology might be needed to help them to overcome their barriers that limit their independence. And so that's, we're not going to talk a lot about the paperwork part of it, but we're going to talk about how to make referrals to the assistive technology coordinator, what the assistive technology coordinator does, and our philosophy on funding AT. The AT process, that's what happens when somebody walks into your office and needs services, to the follow-through when they receive their equipment and their training. Okay. We're going to talk about collaboration, how we work well with one another, and how we discuss issues together so that we're all on the same page for the benefit of our consumers or clients. And then we're going to talk about collaboration, and we'll talk about collaboration again. So that's really what my purpose is to impress in each of your minds the importance of working together with your partners for the benefit of your consumers. The referring partner, that would be, in our independent living system, the independent living specialist or independent living coordinator, as we call them, the case manager, or whoever would happen to make a referral to the assistive technology coordinator. Okay? Well, and then the consumer starts the whole process by requesting services. We're either referred to a consumer or a consumer's referred to us, and then we follow up and we collaborate together. And it's very important that all three parties are on the same page through the process. Because sometimes in the funding world that I work in, sometimes there isn't any money. And sometimes consumers need to wait and wait and wait. Okay? And it also takes time to perform an assessment to see what's needed. Okay? Well, the consumer sometimes thinks they're going to receive whatever equipment they need like within a week or two. Doesn't happen very often. Sometimes if they're working in the independent living system, each independent living center has a loan bank that they can help with. I knew the Utah Center for Assistive Technology has a loan bank. Other organizations have loan closets, equipment closets that they can help people with as they can. And so in that way they can get something temporarily while they're waiting for something on a more permanent basis. No matter what the funding source, it's going to take time to get something on a permanent basis. Okay, and so if the assistive technology coordinator and the person that referred to the assistive technology coordinator, if that referral is made and then the referring partner just kind of forgets about it, okay, and then the consumer calls, let's say the independent living coordinator, and says, "Where's my stuff?" That case manager may not know, because that case manager hasn't taken the time to confer with the assistive technology coordinator to find out where they are in the assessment process, and they haven't received a report back yet. Okay, there may be circumstances that can delay the report. Could be that the workload is overwhelming, so you have to prioritize the workload to get out and make the assessment. Could be that maybe the consumer has moved and hasn't let anybody know. Okay, does that ever happen? Once or twice? Okay. Could be that for some reason the consumer isn't aware that the assistive technology coordinator needs to visit with them and may be a little resistive. There could be all kinds of reasons why it could be delayed. Sometimes it goes through fairly smoothly, but in any event, the consumer may not know who to call to find out where they are in the process, so they can have some reasonable expectation as to what's going on with their particular case. So all three partners up there, there needs to be collaboration so that everybody's on the same page. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, we'll talk a little bit about paperwork, because that's where the case management part comes in. And that's really an important part of the process. There's not many programs that I'm aware of where there isn't some kind of a financial need test that's given, for example, or eligibility required so that people can receive services. And that's true in the independent living assistive technology program. And so paperwork is a part of it. And what am I talking about there? The consumer application, that's when you're made aware of somebody needs services, however that is, whether they're referred to you or they just walk through the door. Generally, you'll take care of that first by filling out an application, finding out their demographics, finding out what programs they may be eligible for, finding out why they came in, what they think their needs are, and what you may be able to do to help them. Okay? Eligibility is important in independent living. An individual needs to have a disability, okay? A significant disability. That doesn't mean most significant disability. Anyway, there's some legal definitions for those kinds of things. But generally, if an individual is impaired in some activities of daily living, one or two, then they'll qualify for independent living services. And once they're eligible there, in the independent living process, there's a financial needs test that is completed to see if they're financially eligible for our program to be able to purchase equipment for them. And then also in our program, and I'm sure in others, there is some kind of a plan or planning that goes on. It may be an informal plan that's written out in case notes, or it may be on a formal piece of paper that's called a plan. Independent living, we have an independent living plan. And it's filled out with goals and objectives and begin dates and end dates and signatures and all those kinds of things the plans usually have on them. But it represents kind of a contract between the consumer and the independent living program that if the consumer does what they say they will do, and the independent living program has certain obligations and so forth that they will do, that we can continue on and help them to find the equipment they need or other services. Independent living is, assistive technology is just one part of what independent living centers do, but that's what we're talking about today. We'll talk about the consumer will understand after helping to formulate that plan that there will be an assessment, that if they don't agree with something, if somebody says no somewhere down the line in the process, to whatever, that they have a resource that they can go to. And that usually includes going back to the case manager and then their supervisor or director. And all the way along, they can be involved with the Disability Law Center that's statewide. So those types of things are outlined on our plan. So there is the eligibility and the planning, and all that has to happen before you make an assistive technology referral, okay? In our system, without a plan, services are not supposed to be provided. Maybe I'm saying that wrong, because you do provide services sometimes for individuals and maybe not have a plan, but it might be something like a loan bank loan or something like that. But for paid services to be received, there needs to be an AT referral. There needs to be a plan first before that referral. Let's talk about what that AT assessment service process looks like. Okay? But the first thing you'll do is make a referral to the assistive technology coordinator, okay? The AT coordinator then will be in charge of coordinating the assessment and the evaluation, okay? They will assess what is needed, evaluate what equipment is best, and make a recommendation back to whoever made the referral. Because we're a mixed group, I'm calling that the referral partner. But you know who you are. I think at least once a month, you should be in touch with the assistive technology coordinator to find out where your consumer is in the process and what's going on. So that when phone calls come, and they generally do, you're both on the same page with what you tell the consumer. Okay? Consumer satisfaction is very important. We could spend $10,000 on a piece of equipment. If they don't really want it, they're not going to use it probably. Or they'll use it for a little while and then it'll end up in the garage or sometimes even in the dump, okay? It's expensive equipment sometimes, so we need to be careful when making assessments. You may go out to evaluate for a scooter and find they need a wheelchair, but for whatever reason they are insisting on a scooter. And so it takes some counseling skills, some people skills in order to come to an understanding of what they will be happy with and what will help them. Sometimes maybe you need to go to the second best option because they'll use that, but they won't use the number one thing that you suggest, okay? So it takes some work to do that, but it's important to come to that agreement that the consumer will use what's provided. Now, they may just say, yes, I will use it, because some people just won't like to tell you. There's those that will tell you exactly what they want, and then others will tell you, whatever you will give me will be just fine with me. So you have both ends of the spectrum. So that assessment, as you go out and visit with folks, you might have to do some digging and some things to come up with real solutions to real problems. So consumer satisfaction is very important. A written report to the referring individual or organization, that's the product that you as the referring partner would expect back, a report. And we're going to talk about report writing. Then, this is a joint responsibility between the referring partner and the AT coordinator to follow up. And I might say that you ought to involve the vendor that provided the product in this follow-up to make sure the consumer's trained on the equipment. So that's very important. Follow-up is incredibly important so that that equipment isn't sitting out there going to waste because they don't know how to use it. Okay? Usually there's some kind of a form that you fill out to send to an assistive technology coordinator, or you make a phone call and say, could you please do this and this and this? Okay, we're calling that the AT referral request. I'm going to tell you some things on it that I would suggest are important to be a part of that request, okay? The demographics for the individual, who they are, where they live, what their age is, a little bit about where they live, their living environment. You want to mention what the disabling condition is, okay? And that's important to know, but probably more important is this. What is it they want to do that they can't do? That through our processes with the appropriate equipment, they can overcome that barrier or significantly alleviate that barrier. Information of consumer expectations. So if they do come in with something specific in mind, I think it's good to say what it is. Okay? And then think of it as you going to, maybe you want to buy a Blu-ray disc player, okay? And you're not sure which one is the best kind. So you're going to kind of shop around a little bit. You might check out what's at Walmart. You might go to Best Buy. You might go to Target. You're trying to find somebody at one of those stores that has some information that will help you make the decision that fits your situation, okay? So it's no different with an AT referral. You're going to want to ask questions about what you want, okay? So you want to know what are the options, okay? And then what's the recommended option or the best option? Is the consumer in agreement? Okay. And then what's the cost and where can the equipment be purchased? That's what you want to know. Okay. So ask. You maybe can assume, because we've done these trainings for years and years and years within the IL system, that the AT coordinators all know that that's what you want to know, and generally that's what you get back. But to make sure, ask, okay? It's just good professional quality to be able to ask those questions so that if there is a mix-up somewhere, you can say, well, I asked and I never got the answer to that question, so what's the answer to that? Because ultimately, okay, who buys the equipment? Who makes the decision on the purchase? Okay, well, yeah, I do up at the state level, but who makes the decision to send it up? That this is it, this is what we need, okay? It's the case manager, right? Some indication that the consumer is in agreement or satisfied with it or whatever, okay? So ask those questions. With wheelchair assessments, for example, and other types of assessments, who else might be professionals that we could turn to, although we might have to pay them? UCAT too, absolutely. We don't have to pay you. Occupational therapists or physical therapists? Right, okay. So the ATPs that work for the contract companies are good, okay? But it's good for us to go through this process. A lot of times we have to rely on vendors to help us with the professional aspects of whatever we're trying to get assessments on. We'll be talking to these vendors to help us, but the purpose of this is to make you familiar with the types of equipment and the types of assessment that may be necessary for these various pieces of equipment, so that when you go out with a vendor, you may have at least some educated idea that they're out there making a real assessment and not doing what Rex talked about, bumping up the price because we're adding this or adding that or recommending a more expensive piece of equipment, a more expensive chair because I'll make more commission. All right, so the AT coordinator then, he needs to make sure, he or she needs to make sure that they understand what the questions are. If they have any questions about what the referring partner is suggesting or wanting to know, a little conversation is in order so that any misunderstandings are cleared up. Coordinate the assessment with other professionals if needed. Our program, I don't know about other programs, but our program can pay for it. PT or an OT will pay their fee to go out and make an assessment, okay, if that's what's needed. So you can see an AT coordinator at work because we're always trying to find the least costly way to do things to the taxpayers of the state of Utah, right? So if somebody else can pay for the exam, do it, okay? Then you'll coordinate the assessment with vendors if that's appropriate. And a lot of times vendors are a very important partner as assessments are made because they're up to date on the equipment. There may be new things coming out that we're not aware of. They can tell us, they can teach us, and they can help. I highly recommend AT coordinators that you go with the vendor out to the consumer's house, okay? I know sometimes, especially in rural areas, that may not always be possible. But if you don't, then you're trusting whatever the vendor gives you and making your decisions based on that, okay? Now we have some good vendors, and yes, they're trustworthy. Include consumer input. Remember, the consumers have informed choice, so inform them of their choices and let them make the choices. Communicate often with the referring partner, which we've talked about. Prepare written assessment and send to the referring partner, okay? Then follow up after the delivery of the equipment, communicating with the referring partner and making sure the consumer receives the appropriate training. In our system, we have a piece of paper we call an equipment receipt, so when a piece of equipment is received by a consumer, then they need to sign that they're satisfied with the equipment. The vendor is supposed to sign it, and then the case manager or the AT coordinator would sign it. But that's just in our system. I know most vendors have some kind of a delivery ticket anyway, where they'll pretty much say a lot of the same things, but not exactly the same thing that we like to see on it, but they'll show that it was delivered and everything. So those kind of documents are important. Here are the elements of a report, and this is kind of, report writing has been important to me, I think, ever since I started working with AT, like 14 years ago or 100 years ago, whatever it was. Because we're not using our own money to buy this stuff, okay? We're using taxpayer dollars, okay? It may seem like a lot of work, and it may seem like unnecessary work in some cases, but we need to document the way that we spend the money so that we can show, if some state senator wants to know why we got this particular piece of equipment for this particular person. Maybe it was a neighbor. They're living next to the neighbor, and all of a sudden this neighbor's who had this old van sitting out in the driveway, and now all of a sudden they're driving a new van with this fancy ramp, and the neighbor says, "Oh, the state bought this for me. We better be able to justify that." And so, be professional. These are not documents to really take lightly, okay? Be professional and thorough in your reporting. And we'll kind of show you some examples on how to do that. But include a statement that shows that you understand what the disabling condition is, what the barriers are, and also what the options are that were explored. So John Jones comes in and says, "I want a scooter," okay, and the case manager says, "Okay," and everything looks okay, you're eligible, you're financially eligible, we'll write a plan, need some kind of mobility device. and mention the consumer wants a scooter. You can put that in the plan. You can put like a scooter, something like that. Okay, that doesn't mean we have to buy the scooter. We could do a wheelchair later, or maybe not at all if it's really not needed, okay? Okay, and then it's sent to the AT coordinator. The AT coordinator reads it. On the bottom it says, the questions weren't asked, it just said, Mr. Jones wants a scooter. We'll call MedSource. So somebody from MedSource will come out and we'll tell the guy from MedSource, Mr. Jones needs a scooter. So somebody from MedSource will go out, do an assessment. We may or may not be there. We write up the request, we send it to Tom. Tom looks at it, there's been an assessment. The consumer agrees, okay? Okay, so Tom says, okay, and I'll send it to my secretary, Elaine, and she'll do out an authorization for us. That's a purchase order. Send it to the vendor, the scooter's delivered. Mr. Jones gets the scooter, gets on to drive it, okay, and he has some kind of condition where his thumb doesn't work very well and you can't push the button. Okay? This has happened. This has happened. Okay, so this isn't just a boilerplate type process. Okay, we're dealing with everybody's individual circumstances are different, and so handled in that way. And treat them like the individual that they are, and make sure that you do the correct assessment that gets them the correct equipment that will help them. So describe the options that are explored, suggest the best option, and justify the reason. Okay? I like boilerplate as well as you guys do. Okay? But read through your boilerplate and make sure it applies to this consumer before you send it in. I've seen some interesting ones where hers or his. It's okay to use boilerplate, okay? There's some things where it's appropriate, but go in there and make the changes that are appropriate so that you get the necessary wording in there that justifies the equipment the right way and the right information is in there. So that's just about boilerplate. So the AT coordinator suggests in his report the best option, okay? And justifies the reason. Okay, is the consumer on board? We've talked about that. So a little sentence, yes, talk to Mr. Jones. He agrees with this assessment, something like that. Include specifications, bids, costs, and vendors who can provide the equipment. Now, if it's something fairly low cost, that's less than $1,000, for example, you may only have one quote from one vendor, and that's perfectly okay. Over 1,000, and your written assessment does not need to be 5 pages to get somebody a lift chair, if that's all they need. These are just kind of the basic elements to touch on. Now, as things become more expensive, over 1,000 and higher, then some of the writing becomes more extensive. We need a little bit more justification and a little more specifics as to why this individual needs this and this and this. So that's what we're trying to teach here during these 3 days, is for you to become familiar with the equipment that's out there, make the correct assessment, and then be able to put it on paper so that some guy like me in Salt Lake knows what somebody out in Vernal needs, and I've never met the person, don't know the situation or anything. I only know what I read. Make sure what I read tells the story. And I'm sure that's true in other agencies, because you go through approval processes for purchases and things, and there needs to be justifications. So become good writers. You can justify a lot of things with good writing. Here's some general guidelines and philosophies for AT coordinators. Guideline 1. Recommended equipment must be necessary, appropriate, and the least possible cost to the state. The assessment must be complete before AT services are considered. Guideline 3, consumer must be advised. The recommendations are subject to approval processes and policies. A written report must be submitted to the referring partner, and the consumer must pay for any unnecessary upgrades. Let's talk about these, okay? So, guideline 1, the recommended equipment must be necessary, appropriate, and least possible cost, okay? Be aware of the barriers, we talked about that. Be aware of the environment, be aware of the consumer's expectations, be discerning of what is a need versus a want. Be aware of the funding limitations for the various funding sources being considered. Okay? Now, if you're not aware of all this stuff, there's other people that are, your coordinators. That doesn't mean you need to know everything about everything. The more you know, the better off you are, though. I wanted to go to the bottom one, picking on you AT coordinators a little bit. But when you go out to make assessments, consumers are going to ask questions that probably involve some facet of the purchasing process or state purchasing rules or things like that that get into that kind of stuff, okay? That's not your expertise, so don't get into it. Refer them back to the case manager, and if the case manager can't handle the question, refer them to somebody like me, okay, that can answer the question. There's always somebody that can answer the question, but don't promise that they can have a certain piece of equipment or anything. You're just assessing a need, okay? You're getting agreement, that's true, okay? But you're not making any promises to anybody for anything, okay? That's up to the case manager and to people like me that do approvals for those things when they come up. Now, if somebody comes in and they just need something fairly simple, like, and it's easy, you guys have the expertise, you can tell that the transfer bench would be handy or something like that. In my opinion, I don't know what your bosses would say, but in my opinion, you don't need to send a referral to the AT coordinator for that kind of stuff. You can just write up in your case notes why they need it, put it on the plan, and if we need to pay for it, then you can send in a request to us. You don't even need to involve the AT coordinator. But if I get something like that and an AT coordinator hasn't done an assessment on it, and it's just something simple like that, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to send out a purchase order. Okay, that's just me. And maybe I won't be here tomorrow, but that's just me. Okay. But that's it. Everything else needs to go to the AT coordinator so that he can make an assessment. Consumer must be advised that the recommendations are subject to approval processes and policies. There are usually rules where money is concerned, so if we're providing paid services, there are certain guidelines and rules that need to be followed. So who advises the consumer of those guidelines, those rules, those practices? Generally, it's the case manager. Occasionally, it may be an AT coordinator, which I just said don't do, but you may need to tell a consumer that this is going to be at such a cost that we're going to need a couple of bids and there may be a couple of vendors come out to visit you. That's okay. A written report must be submitted to the referring partner. And let me just tell you, I work for the Utah State Office of Rehabilitation, and they have vocational rehabilitation and the counselors and all that. They have Division of Services for the blind and visually impaired, and for the hearing folks out in Taylorsville. Okay, and every time it's time for the legislature rolls around, okay, we're usually having needs for additional funding or to maintain the funding we have because somebody wants to take it away for some reason. I have to tell you that our agency is pretty good at documenting stuff, and that has saved our bacon you don't know how many times. And because we are able to show that not only are we spending the money appropriately, but by spending the money, eventually it saves the state money, okay? Because somebody doesn't have to go into a nursing home, or somebody gets a job and pays the money back in taxes, those kinds of things, that the legislature has been pretty good with us. We had some cuts like everybody else, but the cuts weren't maybe as deep, And when we had a little bit of money last year and this year, we were able to get additional money for our assistive technology program and for the centers and for other programs that USOR has, because we're able to show documentation and be able to answer the legislative analyst's questions. So paperwork is not just boilerplate, okay? It plays a very important role in keeping our programs alive and healthy. So that, why? So that we can keep our jobs? Well, that's secondary. Number one, so that our consumers can enjoy the services that they need so they can overcome their barriers. Consumers must pay for unnecessary upgrades. So, for example, van conversions is a good example. Well, what's a converted van? That's a van that in our system, the consumer purchases the chassis, but we will pay for a conversion. In other words, we will put in the lift, we will put in the tie downs, we'll put in the hydraulics that make it go up and down, those kinds of things. That's all part of the conversion. We've had regular vans where, well, they get sent out and the floor is lowered, the hydraulics are put in, the ramp is put in. If they want extra things, for example, sometimes we have to do something with a porch or a deck so that a porch lift will work, okay? So then the consumer says, oh, well, I want a 18 by 25 foot deck, okay? No. We'll pay for whatever is necessary to handle that lift. If they want the rest, they can pay the extra. The same contractor can do it, but in conclusion, okay, this is basically the process. Have you enjoyed today? Has it been helpful? It's always nice to see what's new out there in the different areas of disability that we work with. And we hope we can keep doing this stuff so that folks from different agencies can get together like this. I think that's great, rather than us doing our own little thing. So we love having you here. Okay, I guess we're done then, Alma. Thank you very much.